So ever since I was a boy, I've always been fascinated by amateur psychology and about sort of the herd mentality, the idea that, people get together and they want to do what the next person does. I always thought that was fascinating because everybody who, what I call, in my youth, succumbing to peer pressure, which I rarely ever did, um, to me was the opposite of what you should be doing. Um, what's curious to me is you have people who call themselves individuals. I'm a great individual. I'm very, very unique compared to them, very, very special. And then they do what everybody else does. Like this craze with pickleball, for example. Everybody has to play pickleball now. All right. It's fascinating to me. But it's also been fascinating to me when I see somebody being brutalized or beaten up on a bus or a subway or on a city street, and people don't call the police. They stand around and they take pictures of it and they video stream it. And if you sent me a video of that, my response would be, "You mean you stood there and witnessed this and didn't do a damn thing to stop it?" And of course, I'd probably never hear from them again, but I'd probably be just as happy. Um, this bandwagon effect, as it's often called, is kind of curious because with this bandwagon effect, we have the idea of uh, this cognitive bias that people buy into when especially when they see something that gives them an opportunity to look better than the next guy. You know, this is kind of an ancient notion. You're feeling terrible about yourself. It's a great way to feel better by simply jumping on the bandwagon, the popular trend. If it's going after the fat kid or picking on the mentally handicapped kid, that's an easy thing to do. I mean, I used to fight it when people would pick on my daughter. I used to fight it when I got into a number of fights because somebody was picking on the gay kid or the fat kid or whatever. I just didn't think it was right. And I got picked on a number of times as well. But, over time, you learn that the way that you deal with a bully is you have to fight back. But what if there's a bully pack? Okay. Because people want to be part of a group. And as this psychological effect is called the bandwagon effect, it is essentially a cognitive bias that gets groupthink going. And what you do is everybody thinks essentially the same way. Here's the word peer pressure, which is how I described it in my youth. And the problem with this, of course, it can affect our choices in ways that can be both good and bad. And I'm not only referring to, trolls and their attack of me on my site, but I'm also, very aware that for those of us in this movement who are trying to thread the needle and demonstrate what the police are actively doing against us because it's easy for them to look like good guys and claim that they are protecting children against we so-called bad guys. It's equally possible that people on our end are blind to the fact that there are people in our midst who actually attempted to do something with children or who had done something with children. We get around that, frankly, by acknowledging that there are people, as I've said many times, whether you did a little something or didn't do something or tried to do something, the question is, what do you do with these people afterwards? Okay. We have to remember that there are lots of people who married and behaved in ways that today, married people younger and behaved in ways today that we might find um, well, the younger crowd would say creepy. I give you a couple of two examples, right? Grover Cleveland, who was one of our presidents at the turn of the century or near the turn of the century, was 49 when he married the 21-year-old daughter of a friend of his who had passed away. And Cleveland was the executor of the estate, if I have the story right. And as executor, what he tried to do was to deal with his friend's affairs and paid off the bills and ended up marrying the executor's young daughter. Um, which one might claim in today's standards that he had maneuvered to uh, deal with this poor young woman and basically seduce and take advantage of her. Another presidential story has to do with our sixth president, John Quincy Adams. John Quincy Adams was famously known for every morning leaving the White House back in the day where you could walk out of the White House, go down to the Potomac River, take off all his clothes, and jump into the river and have a lovely swim, and then jump out and dry off, dress, and go back to the White House, go back to work, start his day. Of course, today that would be a scandal and a half, but back then it was very normal. I don't recall reading any articles about how bizarre or terrible this was, but today, of course, the tongues would be wagging. And so we have a lot of things where people jump on, whether it be diet fads or about elections. Election denialism is a big deal. Trashing Trump is a big deal. I've been guilty of that myself. Fashion, music, social networks. Everybody has their particular little group that they like to join. And what's really interesting is it creates sometimes a hostile aggression in people. So you have a hostile aggression as in this article in Psychology. I hope it is visible here. I'll post it certainly down below. Hostile aggression, psychology, understanding its definition, causes, and impact. This is an article of September 15th, 2024, last year in Behavioral Psychology periodical. And it talks about how people develop this hostile aggression toward other groups or other types of people that's triggered by a number of different items in their lives. I would argue that it's triggered by one particular item in general, and that's fear. I think that part of it is, a fear that somebody's going to get something over on you, a fear, frankly, that if you had a thought and didn't act on it, somebody else shouldn't have a thought and be acting on that and get away with it. There's a lot of ways to look at this, but it's this kind of idea that has created the uh, troll mentality where they're attacking people. And what's interesting, if I go back to this bandwagon um, element here, or this article, it talks somewhere in here about, heuristics, mental shortcuts that make decisions faster and more efficiently, which can be good for a group of people or an individual, but you're naturally inclined to also make mistakes. Okay. When you hop on the bandwagon, as it says here, you conform to certain principles, and sometimes those are wrong, but there are very, very powerful backings behind it. For example, the desire to be right, the need to be included. There are some people who just want to be in the in crowd so bad. They just want to be in the right. They want to be known as the good people. And it's very easy to attack a group like sex offenders as the worst of the worst and to attack them, even though you don't know anything about the particular case. People are also, I think, intellectually lazy. This is my editorializing. They don't want to have to do the research and think about it. I've had people tell me, trolls finally admit, no, I just want to attack you. It's fun. And then they go on their little troll sites and they make fun of you, and they've done little diagrams of me, written little uh, dirty lyrics and limericks and stuff. It amuses them, and some of them are very intelligent. They're very clever. I've laughed over some of the things that they put there, but at the same time, um, the damage they do is extensive. And again, what do you want to do with a group of people who are marginalized in society? What benefit is there by marginalizing them more, by ostracizing them? What do you get out of it? Well, they get out of a lot of things. They get a desire to be right. They get acceptance. They get, all kinds of feelings of higher self-esteem while they're pushing other people down, or as a result of pushing other people down. Of course, the risks about these are pretty extensive, right? And what happens is you end up being blind to certain things. You have your I'm trying to remember the name of it, but certain biases that blind you to what's actually going on. All right. It can blind you and make you think that everybody else is doing it, like let's say bad eating habits. Everybody else is doing it. So, they're still alive and moving, so I'll do it too. It can be very unnerving in a social setting for everybody to be drinking and you not be drinking. That's one of the reasons people drink or go and start doing drugs recreationally, that in their particular physiology makes them then addicted. And the same sort of addictive behavior can cause you to do things that are considered deviant, such as exposing yourself in public, such as supposedly going after children and going after children, cross dressing. I mean, a number of things that some people view as harmless in some respects and very harmful when it comes into the public light. So, some suggestions on how to avoid the bandwagon effect, according to this article here: be wary of simple solutions, easy solutions, right? Everybody wants to know everything is black and white, right? Remember that, Trump supporters, right? Just if if you hear that it's very easy, you just need to do this, it probably isn't. There's probably more to it. And it's worthwhile to say there could be an easy solution, but maybe it's more complicated. Seek some other information sources. Say to yourself, I need to get some more information. Okay. You could say, recognize that you have biases and that you may have some gaps in your thinking. You may be wrong about something, right? I have been told many times that by people who don't know very much about my case that I'm wrong. Shortly, I ran across some information that I was digging for in boxes that I needed for my book, and I'm going to put that out there and read through some of the text. It's going to take me a while because I'm going to copy it. I'm going to shade a couple of areas because I don't need to say a couple of dirty words in there. But you're going to see exactly how Detective Bauer tried to link two conversations that were completely different. Um, looking for evidence, actually look for evidence, try to understand what's really going on. And, if trolls will say, well, we look for evidence. Well, as I've said before, if you're just reading the court transcripts, that doesn't have everything. The court transcripts are not, in sex cases, the chat transcripts. You should be wary of the fact that police are not willing to show their evidence. You should be wary of the fact that very often police lose evidence. It's amazing. They get very, very clumsy when they're required to put their cards on the table. Gee, we can't find it. We lost it. It got corrupted. It got damaged. We don't know where it is. We've heard all these stories. And instead of saying, oh, sure, you're just saying that, consider that maybe the police actually are the ones saying that and that they have something to hide too. You may want to look at it that way. So these are just some of the things that I would think that you might want to consider when you are wondering what actually happened in a case. You have the bandwagon effect. You have the hostile aggression that comes from it as people justifiably don't want to see certain groups harmed and marginalized. But what's really interesting by trying to pretend like they are defending children, I do say it's a pretense, because if you're not out there fighting for children, you're not volunteering to tutor kids, babysit them, then you don't have any right to really be talking much about it. I've done all those things, including being a parent. Okay. I've been defending children and I've been in for many, many years, decades now. And I've been an activist since I was about 13. Okay. So, you can say what you want, but if you're a vigilante out there and you're collecting money and you're feeling good because everybody's telling you how wonderful you are, or you're catching people who may or may not have done something, and yet you're not really doing anything for kids, there's sort of a secondary consideration. You may want to consider that you are part of the problem and not being part of the solution. So I hope this made some sense. Please hit me back with some comments. Please, as always, like and subscribe. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked. Have a good day.